Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm Rachel Stevens. I have worked at Red Monk for 6.5 years, and I've been at a Monktoberfest attendee and organizer for far longer than that. So you've probably, if you've been here before, or even if you've seen me this year kind of running around behind the scenes, that's usually where I am. This is my first time on this side of the lectern. And we are... And I'm kind of terrified, which is going to thematically tie into this talk. So everyone needs to laugh along with my jokes, okay? That is our collective goal here. So I work as an analyst at Red Monk. So besides throwing this conference for you fine folks, our job is to help our clients understand and contextualize technology adoption trends. And we do this entirely remotely, which is irrelevant in this talk for a couple of reasons. The first is that in order to do our jobs well and kind of have a pulse on technologies and communities, we tend to be very online. Like, we have to understand what's happening in these various communities. And the second part is that I left 2 beautiful and very funny children home in Denver. And so this talk is like an ode to being online and like watching these same interpersonal conflict patterns emerge again and again and again. And it is also an ode to my children's favorite jokes. So my youngest is 1.5 years. He adores Sesame Street, and in particular, he really likes that old skit of Bert and Ernie, where Bert just keeps getting increasingly frustrated that Ernie can't hear him, and Ernie keeps going, "I can't hear you, Bert, I got a banana in my ear." And he thinks it's so funny. And he's just told his very first joke, which is he puts his finger in his ear and he goes, "Nana," and it's so funny. It's absolutely amazing. And then my oldest turns 5 next week. She's really excited, and she thinks she's at the age right now where it's really funny to fool people. And so she likes to fool people with this common setup, which is "I don't like ice cream. I love it." And so all of which is to say, my talk today does not have a title. It has 4 titles. So this talk is a reflection on how we view ourselves as community members and how we treat each other, and how those things aren't always aligned, and kind of thinking about these gaps between our sense of self and then also our behaviors. The alternate titles are a little bit less formal, but I think they get the point across more vividly, so we're going to dive into those ones. First title one comes from the Mitchell and Webb comedy sketch where we portray 2 soldiers who are kind of questioning the side that they're fighting for. So Monktoberfest, today we ask ourselves, are we the baddies? Let's think about it. Option 2 comes to us from RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm really hoping the audio works because I want them to say the title.
Is it me? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Maybe I am. Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain.
Oh, getting that audio to work was my big coup. Hooray. And then the final title kind of comes from the classic subreddit, and I think it kind of cuts to the heart of the matter, which is am I the asshole? Before I dive in, I want to acknowledge that I'm up on the stage with an extreme amount of privilege. I am white cis het. I'm mostly able-bodied. I'm going to say I'm Pareto principle, 80 able-bodied, 80% able-bodied, and then that's the part that matters. Who needs the other 20, right? And I think relevant to this talk in particular is that I am classified as neurotypical. And the reason this matters is that I absolutely recognize that going into a talk where we're talking about, 1, how we interact with the world, and 2, how we see ourselves in the world and how the world sees us, it's going to hit really differently depending on where we're starting from. And especially for any of our friends out there who are on the autism spectrum, I just want you to know that I've held you in my heart as I have created this talk. I've really tried hard to make sure that this is inclusive and kind of broadly relevant. But if I missed the mark in any way, please come find me afterwards, send me a message afterwards, because you're relevant and your experiences matter, and you're valid. And so please, if I am the asshole in this talk, feel free to call me out as one, because that's how we all learn, that's how we get better, and you are wonderful people. So I just want to make sure we start with that. All right. So now we're going to start with the story of the rant that created this talk, which is it goes back to a very specific moment and is also somehow a tale as old as time. So like once upon a time, there were two people on the internet. Person A was like this well-established person in their career. They'd created a lot of developer content. They had a good reputation, considered like important in the community. Person B also had a sterling technical reputation, their own sizable following, but was much earlier in their career. And person A sent person B a DM. And this is going to be shocking. But it turns out that the contents of that DM were not of a professional nature. And it turns out that person B was not super into that and let them know. The next shocking thing is that person A did not stop. Person A doubled down. And then person B was put in a place where they had to figure out what they were going to do. Like, if person A is harassing them, someone who has a reasonable, sizable following, a reasonable place that they can protect themselves, like, what are the odds that they're doing this to other people in the community? Does person B have a duty to call out this behavior and try to protect others? Or should they just bury it and move on? Person B went with what I consider to be a brave thing and made the DMs public. And they called out the behavior on Twitter. And shocking thing number 3, like a small corner of Twitter absolutely exploded. There were a few camps involved in this eruption. There was a large audience that was supporting person B and like condemning the DMs. There was this Casablanca portion of the internet that was just like shocked that there was harassment happening on the internet. And there had to be some logical explanation of why person A would do something that's like so out of character, because person A is amazing. Like, they would never do that. And then there was like fans and staunch defenders of person A that like made their own counterattack. So up until this point, I deliberately left the gender of the parties out of this because I didn't think that we needed to start there, but we're going to need it for this next part of the story. And that said, I also feel fairly confident that you have all seen this play out on the internet enough, and you know the archetype of this story pattern enough that you have filled in those blanks on your own. So like, show of hands, who thinks person A identifies as a man? Yeah. Who thinks person B identifies as a woman? Yeah. So, anyways, you're all right. But anyways, the group of people who charged to the defense of person A, like we had a crusader, and it was someone out there who tweeted something along the lines of like, these girls have years of practice being offended for attention. That was a paraphrase, but it was close to that. And it was the worst. It made me so grumpy. Like, generally speaking, I try not to get involved when Twitter explodes. But like this tweet and like the way it was like victim blamey and like the belittling use of the word girls instead of women and like its clear disregard for the experience of person B and also just like what that implied for women in the industry overall, like it got under my skin. I could have logged off. I could have, like, it was a weekend. Like, I could have totally ignored this. I could have blocked the most egregious people saying the most hurtful things. Like, I could have used a tool like Block Party and just kind of blocked this all out en masse. But, like, I was feeling a particular flavor of petty that day. And so I didn't do the healthy thing. I didn't do the rational thing. And, like, what I did is I went through one by one and I manually blocked every single person that liked that tweet about girls wanting attention, just so that I could glare at them through the computer screen. Because I was feeling a lot of petty, like just a lot of petty. Just as an aside, I was really struggling to find a way to depict the concept of pettiness. So I thought of 3! And also, Steve, I don't have any of the rights to those Tom Petty images, so we're going to have to figure that out in post. But like, it was in the process of manually blocking everyone that this talk was formed, because I noticed a rift. And there was like this frequent inconsistency between the people who had like proactively gone out of their way to get involved in this Twitter explosion and support objectionable content that had, like, they'd chosen the side of pro-harassment, they'd chosen the side of objectification, they've chosen the side that diminishes and demeans their fellow women colleagues in the industry via supporting this tweet. And at the same time, these people were telling really different stories about themselves in their profile bios and their pinned tweets and their recent tweets. There were people who had things in their bio like, working towards the betterment of society, which is great. Like, people who tweeted about the importance of emotional intelligence as something that was not a taught skill. All right. There were several people, this was the one that concerned me. It's like several people who are actively working to build developer communities and bring newcomers in. It's like, what does that mean for our industry if the people who are liking this tweet are the people who are actually building communities? Like, that's kind of terrifying, right? There was someone, this one I was baffled by, someone who had recently retweeted an internship opportunity explicitly targeted for women. Like, how are you both advancing women and diminishing women at the same time? Like, I just don't get it. And then, but my very favorite was someone who retweeted, like, being a good engineer will take you far, but being a good colleague will take you farther. It's like, being a good colleague to who? Like, what are you doing? Like, the disconnect, right? And so, I know there's a disconnect behind the keyboard in real life. I know that there are trolls, and I know that there are differences between social media platforms. Like, people show their best selves on Instagram, and you show like your ranty self on Twitter, and like that all happens too. But like, what shocked me here is that it wasn't Twitter versus real life or Twitter versus Instagram or other social media. Like, this was an internal disconnect between how these people perceived themselves and positioned themselves when they were like filling out the about me versus how their behavior looked when they didn't realize people were watching and trying to connect the dots. So one of our former monks is Donnie Burkholz. He's lovely, and he gave a fantastic talk in the past called Assholes Are Ruining Your Project. And it's this really great metrics-driven discussion about how bad actors in an open source community can impact the project overall. And it's totally worth your time to go back into the Red Monk archives and watch this talk because it's the foundation for where I'm coming from today. So if we take Donnie's findings as our foundation, and then we move forward, where we say, like, okay, yes, we take it as a given that assholes can hurt our project, they can hurt our community, they can hurt our workplace. What if we take that one step deeper and ask ourselves, like, how do you tell when you're being that asshole? Because clearly there are people out there who are not making the connection. There's a bunch of us running around with bananas in our fucking ears. Like, we got to figure this out. Hey, I'm not sure Salt and Pepper are actually the originating people of this quote, but they're the ones that I learned it from, and so they're the ones who get attribution in my slides. And we're going to modify their wisdom for another truth, which is that, like, every single person on this planet is an asshole sometimes. Like, every single one of us is an asshole. But the reason that this feels uncomfortable to say sometimes is because our language is wrong. Like, we use the phrases, you're an asshole, or like, don't be an asshole. And we treat, like, when we use the language that way and we use asshole as a noun, we're treating it as like this immutable characteristic that's tied to a person. And that person is an asshole. And I think that point of view can really limit our ability to assess our own behavior and hold ourselves accountable. Because, like, if being an asshole becomes this yes-no identity proposition, like you are or you are not an asshole, it causes cognitive dissonance for us to, like, apply that label to ourselves. Like, we want to be the heroes in our own stories. And so it's much more comfortable to call someone else an asshole. Like, that person's an asshole. I'm just having a bad day. I'm not an asshole. Like, that's not how this works. But, like, what if we shift that mentality where asshole stops being a noun and instead becomes like a descriptor of behavior? So instead of like, you are an asshole, it's like, that's an asshole thing to do. In this context, asshole's not who you are, but it's a descriptor of what you have done. And I think that's a really important first step in self-reflecting, to be able to get us to a place where we can disconnect our sense of self from our actual behavior so that we can examine those behaviors without, like, threatening our sense of self and our sense of self-worth. And I think the other thing that's really important is, like, when we get to that point, I think a lot of the times, like, when we, like in Donnie's talk, it's like, assholes are ruining your project. And yes, you actually have, like, those classic asshole grade A jerks who are gonna have an outsized impact on what's happening in your community. Absolutely, that is true. But it's the small acts of all of us that can create and define that culture too. Like, all of us are part of the culture. All of us can be part of the problem and part of the solution. And we have to be able to actually reconcile with that in order to actually make that decision. So good people can have bad days. Good people can respond to stressful situations in unhealthy ways. Good people can have, like, that one person that just, like, rubs them the wrong way and, like, never brings out their best side. Good people can make mistakes. Good people can hurt other people. And that's what it means to be human. Like, we're fallible, and we have asshole moments. But we're responsible. This is my James Governor call out to progressive delivery. We are responsible to limiting the blast radius of our assholeness. Like, and so in that sense, it's important to consider our behaviors, and importantly, knowing the situation that can trigger our worst impulses. And there are an infinite number of situations where we can be an asshole, but we're going to focus on a few common ones today that can make us be a jerk when maybe we don't intend to be. And that's moments of conflict, times when we're stressed, and misapplied humor. All right, so conflict in and of itself is not assholery, even though sometimes it can feel that way. But in fact, conflict is super necessary and really healthy. But conflict done poorly is usually a prime cause of being an asshole, because I think a lot of times conflict and fighting get conflated in our minds. Conflict is disagreement about how something should be done, what needs to be done. Disagreement exists in the world. Like, we can't have like our Borg hive mind. Like, everybody gets to have their own opinion, their own thought process, their own way of doing things. That's important. But when we escalate that to fighting, usually that's when things have taken a turn for the worse. So first step is like making sure that you have actually understood what's in contention. Like, do you really understand what the other person that you're in conflict with is saying? Do you have a good grasp on like where the specific points of disagreement are? Can you state their position back to me? Like, and like, what I'm hearing you say is, like, can you actually do that? And this one is from Joe Hildebrand, which I really loved. It's like, can you argue their position in good faith? Like, can you come in and actually make a good case for what it is that they are saying? And does it make sense? And can you find the places where you might have overlap? And the other thing that I have found in terms of trying to find these alignments in position is if you're struggling to find consensus, sometimes it can be helpful to like break it up in like that classic elementary school, like who, what, when, where, why. Start trying to figure out where there's consensus on each of those things. Like, what do we need to do? Who's responsible? When does it need to be done? Like, sometimes you're not going to be in alignment on this whole plan, but sometimes you can find bits and pieces. And usually, if you're trying to make headway, usually if you can start with the why, that usually gets you rolling faster than that. It's like, why do we need to do this is usually the most important thing that you can get alignment on. And the rest of the details might still be a struggle, but you can build from there. And just like the dose makes the poison, having conflict and having conflict turn to fighting, it's often about that tone that will escalate things from disagreement to a fight. And sometimes that escalation happens unintentionally because we're human, like we're sacks of meat. And so sometimes like our humanity gets the better of us. And if we're trying to limit the blast radius of our asshole behavior, and we're responsible for paying particular attention to our bodies so that we can make sure that our sacks of meat are not overriding our good intentions, we need to know that we need to be particularly careful about having conflict. So these are courtesy of my therapist. It's like when not to fight. So when you are hungry or drunk, don't pick a fight. Like when you're tired, don't pick a fight. If you're already angry about something else, don't pick a fight. If you're feeling stressed about something, don't pick a fight. Doing it in writing, this one is not a sack of meat problem. This is just a beware problem, so it's asterisk. But like, so much of our interaction right now happens online and in writing that you can't avoid conflict in writing entirely. Like, you just can't. But I just want to call out that writing in particular carries risks. For me in particular, like I can wield the sword so much better in written word than I can. Like I'm one of those people who thinks of the comeback like 36 hours later that I wish I would have used. But like if I'm doing it in writing, like I can absolutely like I can stab you right where I want to get you. But your impact in writing can be so much more devastating. It lacks context, it lacks tone, it lacks the ability for somebody to respond in the moment. And your writing is forever. Like if you say something devastating in writing, the recipient can go back and read and reread that until the end of time because it is theirs to read and reread. And so those two things together, like the power of writing and the fact that it is forever, means that you need to be really careful about conflict, especially conflict that might escalate into fighting in writing. So my recommendation for conflict in writing is like sit on it, like wait a night, send that email after you've cooled off, get other eyes on it, maybe soften the message, add some extraneous exclamation points in like kind ways, but like, ask your women colleagues. We all do that all the time. Yes, but yeah, like think about the moments when you might be misunderstood and try really hard to mitigate them. All right, so situation 2 that we're going to talk about, and this is going to make my partner and my colleagues super laugh, but we're going to talk about managing our stress. My team is going to, so like, I should not be, I think I'm 100%, I'm not in a place where I should tell anybody how to manage their stress. Like, I went into our Red Monk internal Slack as I was preparing for this talk, and it turns out that I've used variations of everybody panic or nobody panic, but 79 times. I've worked at Red Monk for 77 months. It turns out that's more than 1 panic per month. All of which is to say, like, I'm not super qualified on giving like sound advice on stress management, but I'm like, as a fellow panicker, I'm here to tell you about how to get through panic life. It's like being busy, running late, accidentally messing up a client recording 3 times in a row. Like, God bless you, Red Hat, you guys were so nice. Like, all of these are like legitimate reasons to have stressors in your life, or having challenging situations in your personal life that spill over into other areas. We can run out of spoons really fast. And it's easy in those situations to lash out or be grumpy with the people around us, be short, have a hard time figuring out what we're going to do. And what I have found in those situations is being curious about our feelings can pay long-term dividends. So like, if you think, I don't know if your like elementary school nurse had like that chart of like cartoon faces of like, I'm feeling blah, 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 and you can like, this is like the adult version of that. This is the feelings wheel from Jeffrey Roberts. And the way you use it is you start at that core feeling and you kind of work your way out to identify and verbalize more specific feelings. So like an example for me is when I'm feeling angry, usually that is a trigger to examine my feelings more deeply, because anger is rarely a root cause feeling for me. Like, usually I am feeling fear, I am feeling injustice, I am feeling pain, I am feeling frustration, I am feeling vulnerable. And the anger is a manifestation of those feelings that are uncomfortable. And I think stress is one of those ones that is similar. I don't think stress is one of the ones that's in this feeling wheel, but I think when I think about when I am stressed, what I am actually almost always feeling at the root is fear. And somehow we've created as a society this way where it is more acceptable to tell other adults that we're feeling stressed rather than that we're feeling afraid, we're feeling scared. Like, I'm scared that I'm not going to get this done. I'm scared that they're going to react poorly. I'm scared that this is happening. Like, I think that there are some of those primal feelings that we don't like to acknowledge, but can actually be really powerful to acknowledge if we're willing to go there. Like, get curious about your own feelings. Take a minute to explore if things actually can go one level deeper than where you're at now. Because sometimes naming and identifying those underlying feelings can really help you not necessarily conquer it, but at least have a sense of what it is that you're actually grappling with. And the other thing that helps me is kind of those timeline checks. Like, are you in the past, present, or future? Like, a lot of the times when I am stressed, I am in the future. I am stressed about what is to come, not stressed about what are the moments. Like, if you can pull yourself back to in-the-moment feelings, sometimes you can have better control over how you're doing. Doesn't always work, as my 79 Slack messages might attest, but it helps. And then the final one on this section, sometimes we still crack. And when we do, like, we don't get to write off our bad behavior just because we are stressed. I love this quote. It was from Bo Burnham's recent comedy special. But it's like, self-awareness does not absolve anyone of anything. So, like, yes, like, please go explore your feelings. That's important. It's a great skill. But, like, naming the problem is just the first step. And being stressed or having anger, fear, whatever it is, it's not a pass to treat other people poorly. So when you do break, it is on you to make it right, and we're going to get to that later. And this last section is going to be short because I think Corey makes it really succinct right here, but we're going to talk about misapplied humor. And I think Corey captures it, where it's like, if you miss the mark trying to be witty or funny or biting or snarky, the likelihood of hurting someone, and even if you do hit the mark, like the likelihood of hurting someone is still there. Like, make sure your aim is good, because like with humor, especially biting humor, you are headed into asshole territory, and you need to know that going in. So misapplied humor is an easy way to be a jerk, and I want to let all of us know that you are absolutely not allowed to follow it up with, I was only kidding, or like, it was just a joke. Like, not allowed. Not allowed. If you say something in a joking way and it hurts somebody else, you are responsible for owning that and fixing it, even if it was just a joke. So, you messed up. We all do it. We're all human. What do? Step 1 is you stop digging. That's the most important thing. That's how you start your path to recovery. Step 2 is that you need to reflect. And the part that I want to focus on here in the reflection stage is focusing on the fact that your intention is irrelevant. And I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. When you're reflecting about how you have wronged someone, your intention is irrelevant. Your intention may have been great, but you still hurt somebody. And so it's your job to focus not on what you meant to have happened, but what actually happened. And your job is to think about your impact. So like if you find yourself using phrases like, but I didn't mean to, or I'm totally guilty of this one when I argue with Devin, or I'm doing my best. You are focused on yourself. And those are the phrases that should signal you that you are shutting out feedback about how you impacted somebody else's own, and how you're focusing on your own intention and your own behavior instead of your impact on somebody else. And so this next section is about how to give an apology. But like as a quick aside, if you flip this, when you're receiving an apology, it's also really helpful. So like you're receiving an apology, if you look for the other person's good intentions, instead of focusing on how you've been wronged, it just makes your life better. Like if you focus on how you've hurt people, like if you focus on your impact on others and you focus on other people's intentions towards you, like it's a happier life. And it's a place where you can get to a place where you can live with more grace and more understanding of how you can exist in the world. Okay, step 3 is apologize. I think all of us think we know how to apologize, but the important part of apology is explicitly saying what happened, saying why it was wrong, and then what you're going to do differently in the future. So, for example, I am sorry that I sent you unwelcome messages. I've done some reflection and listened to the experiences of other women in the industry, and I've realized that what I thought was shooting my shot resulted in feelings of discomfort for you. I'm sorry my messages made you feel objectified, professionally undermined, and maybe even physically threatened. I was wrong to send those messages at your expense, and in the future, I will stay the fuck out of your DMs and limit our conversations to professional subjects in public forums. You know. And then step 4 is to actually do better. Like, do what you said you were going to do at the end of your apology. Be a better human. And so that's where today we've covered, it's important to focus on identifying our own asshole behavior and separating behavior from identity. We're going to look for those common triggers that might cause us not to be our best selves, and then we're going to do the steps when we inevitably do mess up. But that's not all. I don't like when talks have a bonus round. I love it. All right. So these are some like tactics, text-specific pitfalls. No, read the fucking docs, guys. Sorry, folks. That was my bad. We talked about in previous talks in this conference, it's essential to have boundaries, especially when we're working in open source. Part of the time, like the way you can protect your time and your sanity is to point people towards documentation. Like, absolutely, that is fair and valid approach. But please do it more kindly than read the fucking docs. Like, it's unwelcoming, it's unfriendly to beginners and newcomers. It creates an environment where people are afraid to ask for help, and it's not what we want in the industry. So please don't use this phrase. Next one is strong opinions weakly help. In the best case scenario, this is like a way where you can like form an initial opinion and then like actively work to prove your assumptions wrong. Like in the worst case scenario, you're this guy. Like, and then there's a lot of middle ground. And that middle ground is probably more problematic than you think, because what's happening in the middle ground is that you have staked a claim, and then you're asking your colleagues to expend their time and their energy and their capital to refute your claim. And the capital question, I think, is particularly interesting and relevant because there are people in different demographics, like junior in your career, person of color, only woman in the room, where considerations of capital are really paramount to how they actually navigate the workplace and what do they and do they not have capital for. Is this a fight that I am willing to fight? And so the more often you're asking your colleagues to disprove your own assumptions, it's creating work for them and it's creating emotional work for them that you might not be aware of. So please be aware of strong opinions weakly held. And the last one is exclusionary nerdery. And Anne's talk yesterday was lovely because it's this amazing reminder of the importance of helping people see themselves in our industry. And I think that there are so many ways that we intentionally and sometimes unintentionally create these factions amongst ourselves. So sometimes like front and back end, it's language, it's frameworks, it's sometimes they have the first machine you ever coded on and everyone gets all excited about Commodores, and then you have people who've never seen a Commodore and then you're like, oh, I must not be as valid as these people because they've been doing this for so long that they're using a machine I've never heard of. Whereas mine was just the computer in the computer lab at school. And so it's one of those ones where sometimes we're totally allowed to be passionate. We're allowed to geek out about the things that we love. But we also need to make sure that when we're doing that we're making space for everybody so that everybody can see themselves in our industry and that there's not some kind of contest for who is nerdier than somebody else, who has the ability to be in this space more than somebody else by the merits of their nerdery. And then our last slide here is just Rachel's tips of general kindness. So I have this hobby in life where I try to find singular phrases that I can have in my back pocket for when I don't know what to say. So this is a bonus one for you. This is not on the slide, but anytime somebody asks what I think of a white wine, I say, oh, it's very bright. Nobody ever fights with you. Nobody knows what it means, but it's generally correct. So you're welcome to use that one. The other one for your back pocket is, cool, thanks for letting me know. It's somebody in your team needs time off for a medical procedure. Are you going to ask specifics about their bodies? No, you are not. You're going to say, cool, thanks for letting me know. Do you need anything? Somebody tells you their pronouns. You say, cool, thanks for letting me know. I'll be sure to use those going forward. Cool, thanks for letting me know is an absolutely amazing way to navigate the world as somebody who is approachable and well-meaning and supportive of their community. Other phrases, how can I help? And in particular, asking if somebody wants your help rather than diving in to give that help without consent. Sometimes somebody just wants to vent. Somebody just wants to be heard. Sometimes they actually need help, and they need help in specific ways. But asking before you dive in is really important. Please and thank you get you far. That's just kindergarten. We're all good. And this is just my own personal soapbox, but don't be assholes to the people who serve you. It's your servers at restaurants, your Uber and Lyft drivers, your bartenders. Admin assistants, customer service, unhoused people on the street, all of these people, we need to be gracious and kind to the people that we meet because everybody around us is a human. And we need to be kind, not because we're trying to get any points, but because we believe in the humanity and the dignity of others. So let's get those bananas out of our ears and go be excellent to each other.